Today, we expect our presidents to wear their faith on their sleeves. National prayer breakfasts, mandatory God Bless America sign-offs, and the televised ritual of swearing in on an ancient family Bible have made public piety a basic job requirement. But the men who designed the office held a very different view. The early founding fathers actively guarded their personal beliefs, treating religion as a private matter that belonged outside the executive branch. Thomas Jefferson valued Jesus' moral teachings, but rejected Christian dogma, viewing miracles and the resurrection as corruptions. His solution was physical. Using scissors and glue, he cut out the ethical passages and pasted together a custom DIY New Testament, leaving mysticism behind. James Madison took this privacy even further. As a primary author of the First Amendment, he maintained a strict rule as president to ignore any letters or public inquiries regarding his personal religious views. Decades later, Zachary Taylor upheld this rigid secular wall. Even during a deadly cholera epidemic, he refused to declare a national day of prayer, insisting that religious observance should never be a state-led performance. The U.S. presidency was designed as a secular, administrative role. However, this strict boundary created a spiritual vacuum at the top of the government, one that national crises would eventually force open. When a leader is pushed to the brink by death and war, constitutional boundaries often give way to personal and national desperation. Franklin Pierce faced this through immense personal loss. He buried all three of his sons at young ages, the last in a horrific train accident just weeks before his inauguration. He and his wife spent his term leaning heavily on scripture to cope with the grief. This trauma resulted in a break from tradition on his first day in office. Instead of swearing his oath on a Bible, Pierce chose to affirm it on a law book, a move that still puzzles historians today. Abraham Lincoln underwent a similar evolution. He entered the White House as an unbaptized skeptic who read deist literature, but the weight of the Civil War turned him toward the hope of divine intervention. The massive bloodshed changed Lincoln's rhetoric. He eventually framed the war as divine punishment for the sin of slavery, delivering a second inaugural address that sounded more like a sermon than a political speech. These national traumas permanently altered the expectations of the office. The American public began to look toward the commander-in-chief as a spiritual comforter who could provide moral meaning during times of mass suffering. By the 20th century, as America's military reach expanded, presidents began to use their faith to justify their actions on the world stage. During the Spanish-American War, William McKinley described dropping to his knees to pray for guidance on the Philippines. He concluded that it was an American duty to occupy the islands in order to uplift and Christianize the population. Woodrow Wilson carried this theological worldview even further. He framed the U.S. entry into World War I as a sacred mission and viewed the League of Nations as a Christian duty to ensure world peace. The presidency had moved into a new phase, where personal religious convictions were now used as the primary justification for global military and diplomatic strategy. The institutionalization of presidential religion arrived during the Cold War. The United States needed an ideological contrast to godless communism, and state-sponsored faith became a key part of that defense. Dwight Eisenhower took the rare step of becoming the only U.S. president to be baptized while in office, signaling a new era of official piety. He institutionalized faith in daily American life, repushing under God into the Pledge of Allegiance, and in God we trust onto national currency. This era also established the president's pastor. Reverend Billy Graham became a fixture in the White House, exerting immense behind-the-scenes influence on a succession of commanders-in-chief. By the late 1950s, the environment for the presidency had changed. For the commander-in-chief, projecting religious devotion had become a mandatory political requirement. In the modern era, a president's personal faith is ruthlessly scrutinized. Voters often use it as the primary lens to judge a leader's character and moral fitness. John F. Kennedy had to publicly defend his Catholicism to a skeptical nation, famously stating that he was a candidate whose religion was a private matter and that his primary loyalty was to the Constitution. Jimmy Carter took the opposite approach. He made his identity as a born-again Christian central to his campaign and continued to teach Sunday school classes even while serving in the White House. Faith has also become a narrative of personal redemption. George W. Bush credited a religious awakening and his conversations with Billy Graham for the strength to overcome his struggle with alcohol. Joe Biden continues this trend of visible practice, citing Catholic social teaching as the primary influence on his worldview and frequently attending weekly Mass. While the Constitution separates church and state, the office cannot be separated from the people who hold it. The religious journey of the presidency serves as a mirror of America's own search for moral meaning.